Dinosaurs eating people, it's a tale as old as time, and no trilogies is more common in than the Jurassic franchise. People have been eaten from all manner of things over the years, and in many different ways. Swallowed whole by water gecko, or torn apart by Bonnie and Clyde. There are a lot of brutal deaths in the movies, but like most films that have it, the books are often much more graphic and tragic. The Jurassic franchise definitely is one of those trilogies, and a lot of the characters that died in the movie actually died in the books, and their fates are much worse. Most of this has to do with the fact that the novel has animals with OP stats that aren't shown in the film, or animals that already exist in the movies but are just superior in every way. Some characters in the movies who are deemed as evil are actually more helpful in the book, but still get punished, while beloved folks in the film are power-hungry menaces that get what they deserve in the other verse. Someone had requested this a while ago in the suggestion channel in the Discord, go join by the way, so I thought I'd finally make the video. Only this time, I'm going to be seeing what deadly sins lead to the most dreadful deaths of these characters in the book. If this video gets 3,000 likes, I will do a part 2. But if you want, I wouldn't mind doing a 7 deadly sins video for the cast of the Jurassic franchise over the years. So let me know down below. By the way, if I'm timing this right, then at the time of this video's upload, we should finally be at 100k. Since it's currently 12 in the morning as of recording this, I'm so sleep deprived. So I just want to thank everyone who's been supporting this channel since the start, and to think all of this started when I decided to make that one straight video titled Strongest T-Rexes in Cinema History more than half a year ago. Since then the videos have changed a bit, and it's a much more diverse channel with multiple topics that I thought of, along with some suggestions from Discord members. So again, just want to give a special thanks to everyone who's been supporting for so long. Wouldn't be possible without you guys and God. I know it's a generic YouTuber rant when they reach a milestone, but I mean it. I said that I would do a Q&A when I reach the milestone, and I will before November is finished. Anyway, I think it's about time we look at the characters in the Lost World novel that pay the ultimate price for their deadly sin. John Hammond in the movie is a kind billionaire whose only bad quality I would say is him being a bit too naive at times, but other than that, there isn't really much bad you can say. He cares for his grandkids and actually tries to put measures in place in order to keep people safe, if he can, or if he knows about it. He even agreed with Grant at the end of Jurassic Park that the place needs to be shut down, even if it will cost him billions. However, the novel version is literally the opposite. This version is greedy, bad-minded, and extremely prideful, usually choosing his own pleasure even if it means hurting others. While in the film John Hammond passed away peacefully from natural causes, his novel fate is no less deserving. The situation leading up to his death occurs near the end of the book. Malcolm was fighting for his life after the T-Rex bite, and Hammond didn't give a damn. He actually wanted Malcolm to die, but also knew that if he did, it would bring very bad press to the park. So he decided to go for a walk, and when Hammond walked past one of the workers who politely greeted him, Hammond didn't say a word and just viewed the poor guy as vermin for even addressing him. This seemed extremely mean even for Hammond in the book. Also, with your park in flames and everything falling apart, I guess you'd be a bit more grouchy than usual. After a while he went more inland, and before he can get much further, he heard the bell of a Tyrannosaurus not too far, which caught him off guard. And so without thinking, he ran as fast as I do when I hear cheesecake is going to be at a function, and while not paying attention, he slips and falls down a hill, seriously damaging his ankle. Dazed and in pain, the old man tries his best to make it up the hill, but he couldn't muster the strength to do it, and so he slumped back, wondering if anyone would come and visit him, or at least come looking. He did get visitors, just not the one he had in mind. Some compies watched Hammond in curiosity, assessing his condition, and soon they were inching closer. Hammond didn't view them as more of a nuisance. After all, what could such tiny things do to him? Eventually he just got fed up and threw a rock at one, which deterred them for a while, but soon more came, and they were bolder. It had finally snapped in the old man's head that he was in more danger than he was when he heard the T-Rex call, as soon the little dinosaur swarmed on him, biting all parts of his face and upper body. Now this wouldn't be too bad, but the compies in the novel have venom with some interesting properties. They partially paralyze and put injured creatures in a dreamlike state, making them unable to fight back, and after some moments of kicking and hitting, Hammond's limbs went numb and all he could do was close his eyes, as the little demons ate him alive bit by bit. The craziest plot twist of all of this is that it wasn't a real T-Rex Hammond heard. It was Lex and Tim playing with some T-Rex sounds which Hammond didn't know about. But how fitting was his death? It wasn't pretty, but it was almost deserving for such a prideful man to die in the jaws of the smallest and weakest residents of the park. Pride is often seen as the most dangerous deadly sin, seen that it costs a lot to act out of character or in the interest of no one else but their own. But so does greed, and there is no one else that represents greed in the trilogy more than the mini SUV-sized man, Dennis Nedry. In both the film and the book, his character stays mostly the same, this hungry chief in computer tech that's responsible for most of the park systems, who inevitably causes the shutdown of the park because of his greed. However, in the book, it's somewhat more understandable. It's not right regardless, but with Hammond threatening to cut funds if he doesn't do exactly what he said, or even blackmailing Nedry in some instances, you somewhat understand his motives for, taking the embryos and going to the doctor to sell them to Lewis. For him to pull this off, he of course had to shut down most of the electric function of the park, which led to most other dinosaurs escaping. This act of greed, regardless of what was done to him, led to the death of many in the park, and in the novels, his act caused even more gruesome deaths. So it's poetic karma that he was killed, and as we know, it was a Dilophosaurus that blinded Nedry and then mauled him in the car. This made most of us somewhat happy, seeing that he got what he deserved, but his fate in the novel honestly makes me feel sorry for him, as it's the most infamous of all deaths, and the crazy part is that it came from a familiar yet more sinister face. Most of the plot is the same, with him having to get out of his car after almost crashing it into a wall. However, this time he had to take a detour to the river in the rain, where he realized he's not exactly where he needed to be, but just before he can make his way back to the jeep, he heard some faint hooting, like an owl. He shrugged it off at first, but soon it didn't just get louder, but closer, and soon Nedry found himself running for the first time in decades probably, but this time for his life. Whoever reached the top last, lost, and fortunately for Nedry, he made his way back to the Explorer, and just as he was about to walk closer, illuminated by the headlights, was a 10-foot tall Dilophosaurus the size of a large polar bear staring directly at him, basically daring him to come closer. Frozen with fear, Nedry and the animal had an intense stare down until it finally made a move, which was spitting venom on his shirt. It may lack the flashy thrill like the movies, but still kept the venom. Nedry was disgusted, but then the animal shot again, and this time Nedry felt as though it was burning, so he inched closer and closer towards the car, eyes locked on with the animal. But he couldn't keep this up for long, because the split second he turned to open the car and then looked back up, he never saw again, as the Dilophosaurus spat venom directly into his eyes. Rising in pain and trying his best to see, Nedry soon came to the realization that he was now, well, blind. But he didn't dwell too long on this, as he heard a quick slash, like when you swing a small stick in the air. Soon unimaginable pain followed, but he didn't register all of this. Grabbing his stomach, he started to pull on this rope-like structure that was warm. Then, it took him a few moments to realize just what he held in his hands. Disgusted and in shock, he slumped over to the floor. The Dilo's claws had gutted him, but it was far from over, and it slowly bit into his skull and lifted the man up into the air. This would be especially painful for someone of Nedry's size, sharp teeth embedded into his skull while gravity kept pushing him down while he was suspended. Desperately, even at this time, Nedry tried to stuff his innards back inside, in hopes that maybe, if he completed this task, everything would be fine, but it didn't matter, as moments later, Nedry died suspended in the air. What's weird is that the animal could have easily killed Nedry once he was on the floor, but instead, it prolonged the entire ordeal. Like, why use that much energy to lift him up into the air for him to die? Who could really say? Maybe this was karma for the tragedies that would soon happen due to his greed, because after Nedry shut down the park, many people would die in ways the human mind normally couldn't fathom. So maybe it was karma for the massacre that would soon unfold due to his actions. He had a very prolonged and painful death that isn't matched by any character to date. Genuinely curious though, do you think even Nedry deserved this, or was it a bit too much? Let me know in the comments. The next character isn't so much a deadly sin, but more like a trait of one, like cowardice. Ed Regis was the park's relations manager and was often seen downplaying certain things in the park, especially to Hammond, often saying things like the dinosaurs couldn't hurt anyone, or how could they break out. Later on when the T-Rex broke out, he found himself running out to the Explorer first, leaving Lex and Tim alone to fend for themselves. Look, I respect the self-preservation, but when I saw that line, all I could do was laugh. What do you mean you ran out of the car first and left two children to their fate? But hey, I can't really say I wouldn't do the same, especially if I didn't know the kids. He felt bad, but that was when he found himself somewhere safe. He didn't get away scot-free though, as he was covered in leeches and even wondered if some got into his downstairs. Not too long after, he heard Lex and Tim shouting for Grant, meaning that they survived the Rex's attack, so he thought it may be a bit more safe to head back down to the road. But then the call stopped, and the kids met up back with Grant on the high point somewhere in the jungle, and as Regis was making his way back down, he was still very skittish, wondering if the Rex is close by. Well, he was sorta right, as the forest turned dead silent and Grant saw Regis pressed against a tree. Out of the haze came a juvenile Rex. This animal was around 8 feet tall and walked awkwardly, almost like a puppy now learning how to move. It looked around for a bit and then just went somewhere else, so Regis guessed it was safe to move on, but he guessed wrong, as the animal came back and knocked him down. He was shouting for his life, shouting and flailing his arms for the animal to get back, and it surprisingly did. It lifted its foot from his chest and watched him. When he did get up, however, it just knocked him down again. Then when Regis got up once more, it did the same. It became painfully obvious to Grant that this young animal was playing a game with Regis. However, like most youngsters, some toys just get boring after a while. This time it did not let him rise up. It bit into his abdomen. Regis could only scream and fight in vain, as even as a juvenile it still was the size of a bear, and there wasn't anything the man could do about it. The creature's inexperience worked against Regis, as it didn't know how to effectively dispatch prey yet, so it bit down on multiple parts over and over again until Regis finally succumbed to shock and blood loss. And this is up there in the top 3 for the worst ways to die in my opinion, at least in the book. Imagine seeing your bones crunched and insides being tugged on while still alive. But this was the fate of cowardice. For abandoning the innocent to save his own skin from the adult Rex, he lost his life to a younger version of the animal that killed him more slow than any adult would. The thing I did notice is that for 80% of the deaths, or a bit lower, it was somewhat justified, or it happened because of the character's attitude, like they died by the sin or bad habit they had. Maybe it's just me, but that's what I think. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know who else should have been on the list, or who should be put in part 2 of this video if it gets 3,000 likes. That's all for now folks, I'll see you later.